Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with Convery, the podcast that's your launchpad for career inspiration. I'm your host, Brian Convery, and around here, we believe success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder, it's also about building your own jungle gym. Each episode, we share real stories from all kinds of careers and all levels to help you design a career portfolio of sorts that fits you and your passions. So let's dive into today's conversations. Today's guest is a powerhouse in the world of human resources, a certified coach, and a master at building high performing leadership benches. Please welcome Tiffany Smye, founder and principal consultant at TCS Talent Consulting and former senior director of talent learning and development at MLSE. Tiffany's career is a masterclass in evolving within the talent space. She has led massive recruitment and development portfolios for global giants like RBC and Deloitte, managing everything from campus programs for over 650 annual hires to overseeing HR for banking operations with more than 9,500 employees. Today, she uses that deep expertise to help organizations solve business challenges through people and culture lens, focusing on leadership effectiveness and talent innovation. So, whether you're a student navigating your first campus recruitment cycle, a professional looking to pivot your career, or even just a leader trying to build out a culture of trust and performance, Tiffany's insights will change how you think about talent. Tiffany, welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Wow. And you actually forgot the most important thing. Former colleague,
I was
Brian
gonna,
Convery.
I was gonna inject that. I was gonna say, and that's where we met
Yeah, we
at the
met and
beginning.
we worked together. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I love Powerhouse. Wow. I'm just gonna take that little nugget and put it on a portrait and hang it somewhere in my house so my kids see it every day.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure because we've had a chance to work together to see. I've had a chance to see where your career's gone since we worked together, but still stayed in touch, which is really lovely as friends. And yeah, I'm just so excited. Let's just jump right in. I want to start with some rapid fire questions so our audience can get to know a little bit more about you. What do you think is your superpower?
Finding other people's superpower. I think and not finding it, but helping them to identify it within themselves.
Amazing. Amazing. What was your favorite subject in school? It could be high school or university or both, but what was your favorite?
Well, in high school and before that, it was math. And then in university, when I took first year calculus, it was no longer math. But math was a strong one throughout my growing up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I know calculus in university. I kind of slid through. Like, I'll be honest.
Oh my gosh, calculus is the only thing I've ever failed. Like in my true sort of pass fail,
With math.
I had to take it a second time, and I was just as someone who went to math camp in high school, that was quite embarrassing. But certainly gave me the understanding that you've got to keep going, keep trying, and
Keep learning.
eventually I did pass.
Yeah. Exactly. So we all start somewhere. What was your very first job?
Florist, very lucky to get that one.
Mhm.
I worked part time in a flower shop and actually worked there all through high school and then full time for a year before university. I graduated early from high school and worked there full time for a bit to get some money.
I didn't know that about you. And I think out of the 5 years this has been going, I think you're the first florist ever.
Really? Well,
Yes.
I wasn't official until I got, went and did a deep dive on my learning side in like the
Yeah.
fourth or fifth year I worked there. But yeah, working in a flower shop as a non-creative, I absolutely loved it. It's still a
Awesome.
secret passion.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool. It's up there with like event planners and wedding planners and stuff because people always love their beautiful flowers for events or special occasions, right?
Yeah. Well, no, no more special occasions. I cannot stand flowers as a gift. Like for Valentine's, I do not celebrate Valentine's Day. Mother's Day, don't get me flowers because I know one, they're overpriced. Not because of the florist, because of the suppliers. And two, I know those florists have worked all night for like 3 days before that big event. And yeah, I love flowers, but not on special occasions.
Makes sense. Makes sense. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be?
Connector.
Yep, I can see that. All right, let's jump in. You have had such a really interesting career in life through through your journey, and I know you've managed talent portfolios at like incredible scales from hundreds of campus hires to thousands of employees across Canada and the US. In today's competitive market, and especially with some of the folks that might be listening to this, why don't you jump and maybe share a little bit of what do you think is the biggest thing brands or companies get wrong when they're trying to attract and retain talent, the right talent?
Yeah, that's a good question because attracting and retaining, there's some similarities and connections between the two. But
Yeah.
I'm going to say there's two things, and they're actually quite connected. The first is data. I don't think that companies are using data effectively, and in a couple different ways. The first is I think there's a lot of information that we have access to in terms of employee engagement surveys and exit and onboarding surveys and demographics of our people joining us, and those employees that we have once they do join us. And we're not really using it. And often it's, we take static snapshots, but we're not doing enough deep dive. And that's both by virtue of the fact that I don't think our HR teams that are investing a lot in there. But I just often think it's that are we looking at it in the right way? So,
Mm,
that analysis paralysis we get, and we get overwhelmed by information. So to be able to discern it is quite a significant talent. And I think people analytics has come a long way. We have access to
yeah.
so much information, but it's really how are we using it? So that's one part of it. But there's also, again, not just data, like not just the surveys, but I find so much people don't ask the right questions. So
Mhm.
your question was around like attraction and retention.
Yep.
I think both in terms of hiring managers and then once I have someone, oftentimes, in this world, especially, we don't have the time. So, spending and investing time to actually uncover what's going on with someone, maybe an attraction, what are those skills and getting past that surface layer of questioning. Um, that kind of humble inquiry to
Mm,
figure out and navigate. And that's, me with my coaching hat on and saying, what are the questions that we're asking? And especially with managers, that retention piece, by the time someone wants to go, they're gone, right? And
yeah.
so that early days getting to know someone and sitting down with them and not just what are you working on? Let's get to it. And not kind of crossing that professional line and going too deep on personal, but figuring out what motivates them, what do they value, and how do you sort of connect that with the organization and look at that information, manager to employee, but then scale that up. That's where I get to the second part of what I think organizations are getting wrong. I'm hearing too much around AI as a capacity solution, right? You can get rid of the work that you don't like doing. I think that there's so much power in personalization,
Mhm.
especially you say, like thinking about attraction. We're using AI to make the recruiter's life easier, looking at keywords or things like that. We're looking at AI, in terms of agentic AI and kind of connecting with candidates. But imagine it personalized the experience. It went deep into what do you want to know about the culture, not just the surface brand, but like what it's really like to work here and maybe, deep dive into a day in the life and taking AI to kind of explain that to somebody based on what it's learning. On the second piece with retention, there's so much power in personalizing learning and development
Mhm.
and not thinking, "Oh, well, this person's on succession and we need them to do this." What else is there? Because if learning isn't fun and it's not driven by your own curiosity, it becomes task-like. It
Mhm.
becomes boring and stale. And I think that people are motivated by learning and then applying that learning and seeing what their impact is all about. So I think the two things we get wrong is this: we're not using information in the right way, or we're not getting the information out of people in, non-data informed ways, but through conversation. And I think we are, have this opportunity once we have all this information to personalize the experience, to really captivate people and engage them. And I feel that, AI is the topic of every HR conversation. Every conversation these days is AI, but how can we use it, the power of it? So working and your job feels like, that first time opening up an iPhone and you get to personalize it and work through it, or it listens to you and then starts just giving you Insta reels about dryer vent fires and things.
Yeah.
My current Instagram reel is just listening to me about my dryer and sending me all the ads for dryer vent cleaning. So I know it's working. How do we make it work with organizations to drive people and culture and engagement?
Love that. Great insights. And I think to your point too is so many people are jumping into AI as the topic on everyone's tongue and topic of every conversation. But just like anything we've ever done in our careers, like there has to be a strategy about how you engage with it. You don't just
Hmm.
jump into it and turn it on and be like, okay,
Yeah.
like
Oh, it
what are
works.
you using for? Why are you doing it? What do you want to do?
Yeah, it's the why behind the what, and I feel
Yeah.
like that kind of curiosity is something that we're not creating the capacity for these days. It's more and more and do more and not the thinking time, and I realize that now coming out of the cycle of corporate more than ever, that the amount of, thinking time that I get, and it's like, with 25 years experience, it's
Yeah.
all coming into something really interesting and I find I can lean in a way that I couldn't when, you're facing 8 to 10 meetings a day or you've got to do to,
Deliver.
out to wazoo and back. So it becomes too busy. And I think that curiosity is impacted as a result.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. That's totally true. So let's talk the art of a career pivot because there is a number of listeners who are listening to this podcast, listening to you today, who, maybe are ready for their next chapter or trying something different. I know your journey has seen you move from specialized recruitment roles into high level HR leadership and now into your own consulting firm. For you, what was the internal trigger that told you it was time to maybe pivot into a new area? And what second part of that question, and what skills did you find were most transferable?
I think it's taken me a while to figure out what those triggers or whispers. I call them whispers. There's a book
Whispers.
that Oprah Winfrey wrote called The Path Made Clear. And if anybody wants it, I actually prefer listening to it. I've probably listened to it 15 times. And there's a whole chapter about listening to those whispers. And then, they get louder at times. But two things I've realized have really guided me are, and sometimes it's just one of them, sometimes it's, the combination of the two, but values. When I'm aligned and feel aligned with an organization, organizational values, um, thing just it clicks. I get into my flow. So values are really critical to me and learning. And so some of my career shifts have been around I want to learn more. My team at MLSE made me a t-shirt that said if you aren't learning, you're not living because I say it all the time. It's what wakes
Good
me up in the morning and excites me and inspires me. So I would say, sometimes it's been something's not working here. And after the fact, I feel it's a values call or a values whisper. And sometimes it's just that there's something else that excites me more, something that, a little nugget that I want to learn or something I want to tease out a bit. I've also been very fortunate that it's just, opportunities. So making a move from a HR center of excellence like recruitment to becoming an HR leader, oftentimes that's a hard jump. And if you're not in HR, there's alternative example that you can think of. But that shift, even though it's in the same department, is a hard one to make. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity. But I think it was because I was working for an organization and actually sought out RBC as an organization at the time because its values and mine just absolutely clicked. And because I was learning every day and I loved my job and I loved the company, I was giving it my best and that's how opportunities come up, right? They see you adding value and all of that. But it's really been, my values and learning. And, even with my most recent at MLSE, that was out of my hands, right? That was something it was a, 10% workforce reduction. And I think that I have, started my own business almost unintentionally. And that pivot to me was because of you asked about the capabilities that kind of drive me or that have driven me. I think that starting my own business came from the fact that, I'd established a business network. As I said, my modes connect. I connect with people. I connect ideas. I probably should have been a matchmaker, and put it into, future weddings and things. But but to me, it's about career and connecting people. And so it just people were asking, "What are you up to?" I hadn't quite figured it out, and I think that I am somebody who has to be busy all the time, and I like to be doing things and learning, and so I thought, "Why not?" And it's been a great learning experience. It's kept me engaged in the market. It's kept me learning in HR. It's kept my network fresh. And it's allowed me the opportunity to finalize my coaching certification and come back to what I love so much, which is that one-on-one aha moment that you get coaching someone, whether it's an HR leadership role and you're speaking to an executive and you get that, through that role, or it's in my one-to-one coaching practice now where I get to be that mirror for people, and accelerate their learning and growth of themselves. And I think it comes down to there are, to me, 4 essential Cs, and I have said this since, I was, at U of T at Rotman Commerce as the associate director at their career center, and I will continue to say it. I said it at DeGroote a couple months ago when I was speaking to an MBA class. And the 4 Cs are communication, collaboration, let's just make sure I get this right, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and curiosity. And to me, those 4 Cs, no matter where you are in your career, those are the 4 essential Cs. And to me, they aren't the ones that AI can even compete with, right? Somebody being curious and learning and not just relentless asking of questions, intentional curiosity,
Yeah.
that applied curiosity, critical thinking, right? Connecting ideas and thoughts, the 5 whys, but why, and kind of going into things and breaking it apart, problem solving, communication, whether it's, you know, presentations or active listening, which is a big part of communication. Those are essential. And collaboration, I used to say at Deloitte, if we don't feel like eating pizza with you at midnight on a late, client file evening, that's going to be a hard part of you getting this job, and might be you know a no from us because we want you to work with people and we want everyone. And I think collaboration is different from teamwork. Teamwork is kind of, you're all here, you're part of a baseball team, you're getting that win. Collaboration, I see, as more of a collective effort and bringing in your unique skills and strengths, and that's why it's a critical C and it's not a T, because understanding people's collective strengths and working within them and being able to find that collaborative sort of, sweet spot is really what you look for. So to me, those 4 Cs have been part of my journey as well. They have, gotten me from A to B, and it doesn't mean I'm perfect at them. I still work a lot on the communication one. My 5th C should probably be concise. That's one I'm gonna work on. Um, and then I think there's another one with leadership as you evolve in your career, capacity. And this is gonna be competitive with AI. Capacity has been a differentiator for me. I can take on a lot, but it also has been like a problem for me too, because I can take on too much. So in leadership, I feel the differentiator when you get to leadership. So those 4 skills, they're essential. Leaders need to add capacity, but that's the one where self-awareness becomes absolutely critical because I think that organizations unintentionally can take advantage of that with high performers. And I think high performers, depending on what your motivators are, can lean into that too much. And again, that can lead to overwhelm and, classic symptoms of burnout. And we're seeing a lot more of that these days than ever before.
Absolutely. Um, Thank you for sharing those. I think those are really powerful. I want to talk a little bit maybe about the curiosity for a minute, just to get some more thoughts from you, because I listen to and I speak with a lot of young people that are just starting out. And when they tell me about how they're approaching the job market and different things, I say, yeah, but aren't you curious about like this or to learn? And they're like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, so I wanna get your perspective because sometimes I think as a young kid, we are curious and we draw out of the lines and do different things, but then we're somewhat programmed to conform
Mhm.
that, and as that continues, it can compete with your curiosity." What's your thought about someone who's maybe, like, fighting that battle? Because I I think it's tough sometimes because you're like, "Oh, should I listen? Should I speak? Should I be curious?" Or, or it's I don't wanna say beaten out of you, but, like, it is sometimes pushed down as you conform to what this program life is supposed to be.
Yeah, I see it all the time. I think that, one, our school system is set up to, early education. They're doing a lot better job at like, bringing in curiosity and creativity and helping kids explore. But then they just get caught in a system, right? So I hear so often, my son's in grade 8, my daughter's in grade 9. It's amazing because I don't age and they do. But don't put up your hand, right? Like they're told, like, I don't have the time because teachers are stretched. And so, our school system is kind of like, we don't have the time for that. No, not right now, not right now. And it takes a great teacher, and there are a lot of them out there to
Yes.
actually in the pressure system that is our school system today to kind of nurture that curiosity because there's just too much else going on. Um, I think, thinking about your question, I saw a lot of conformity in when I was working for Deloitte, actually, a lot of the students that were like, the only thing that they wanted was a big four job.
Yeah.
And then when they didn't get it, because so few do, they became completely lost, and it was like, "If not this, then what?" Right? And I think that's probably one of the early days curiosity questions that I have used in my career and to navigate different choices is, "If not this, then what?" Like, am I putting it all into something? Have I programmed myself that this is the only way?
Yeah.
And if there isn't an option B that I feel like I could land on and feel comfortable with, and I'm not having an adverse reaction to it, then have I built enough flexibility? Have I been curious enough about my options? Have I been thoughtful enough about, how specific I'm being, or how narrow I'm being, and maybe challenge that a little more? So I think, when you say curiosity might be stifled, I think that that's part of our system. And I don't think
Mhm.
that we do enough. And once you get to university and you're in classes of hundreds, I mean, how curious can you be, right? You've got to have those smaller study groups. But I think that internal curiosity then you need to start working on and start asking yourself, if not this, then what? Or why am I thinking that, and challenging? And I'm telling you, the more you do that work, the more self-awareness you start to build, and the more emotional intelligence, self-awareness being one of the 4 domains of that, you start to develop. And if you wanna know the secret, to things, it is emotional intelligence, right? That is something that we need to be really reinforcing right now, especially because it is such a differentiator from a, technology platform, from AI. So really just, if not this, then what? Okay, why am I thinking this way? Build out that internal curiosity, push a bit when you can, but ask it, is this a question that they need to answer that I need to get from somebody else? Or is this a question that I still need to rumble with independently?
Good points. Really great points. So, from campus to corporate, I know we both have a huge passion for young people and have worked in this space together. For students who are listening who maybe are feeling overwhelmed by the process, what is one thing they can do to stand out to a recruiter before they even walk into the interview?
Well, I think the hardest part is I'm going to say be yourself because there's only one you. We're all snowflakes, right? But what do you want about me? What do you want from me? Like you have a specific job. What are you looking to fill? I think that it is the only thing that we can truly differentiate ourselves with though, is ourself, right?
Right.
The bigger thing I think when we think about prepping for interviews or the stress that we put on ourselves about these interactions though, the actual thing I would share is you have nothing to lose. And it's something that I started like, again, well, what does that mean? When you're going through a process, and this is where it comes back to curiosity and learning, you haven't got the job. You haven't got even when you're just meeting somebody and you're just networking with them, you don't even have an interview, right? You're putting so much pressure on something that you don't have. And you're thinking, like, well, what if I don't get that? Well, you don't have it right now. So you're literally losing. It's like you're not losing anything. Reshape it to think about what do you have to gain? Because when we go into, and this is, I've started to get really into nervous system and understanding the nervous system. And and its connection to emotional intelligence as well. And I think that when we look at our nervous system and we think we have something to lose, we go into fear, right? And it's this, oh my gosh, I've got something to lose. And that reaction, it's what do we do with it? Well, we have a physical response, a physiological response to that. When we think about what we have to gain, we turn on a different part of our brain. And it's, if we're thinking about what we have to lose and we're, fight or flight, and, we feel that, amygdala response going on, we're not reacting from the part of our brain, the thinking part of our brain, right? We're just reacting. And so if you switch gears and you start to think about what do I have to gain? I'm meeting someone. What can I learn about them? One, it will help inform the questions that you ask them. It will seem that you actually genuinely care about them. You genuinely care about the organization. So it's going to help that connection with them, but it's also going to, regulate your nervous system and help you in your approach. So I want everyone to squash the thinking they have something to lose, the job, the interview, the this. You don't have any of that yet. What do you have to gain? And it's interesting because I started to use the technique at Deloitte. And when I was interviewing, and this is 15 years, 20 years ago, but when I was interviewing for the job at U of T, it was the first time I went into an interview thinking, what do I have to gain? And I went through the whole interview process. And every time I've done that since then, I've been successful. I've helped myself.
Wasn't that interesting?
I've kind of gone into it with a different perspective, and my nervous system has been far more regulated in terms of my ability to think about my responses, to have a conversation that's intentional, and to actually take something away from it where I truly do feel like, oh, I actually got something out of that. That was really enjoyable.
What an interesting way to put it into perspective. And yeah, totally. That's a great piece of advice and perspective. Thank you. During your time at MLSE, you reported to the Chief People Inclusion Officer and led learning and development, succession planning, recruitment, and recognition portfolios for corporate and front office teams. How do you build a culture of excellence in an organization that is so high profile and so fast paced?
Interesting, because I would say I've joined organizations because they're excellent and they have an excellent culture. And so I've been drawn to from a values perspective, even companies that are getting it right.
Yeah.
I think going in, when you're in HR, or speaking to people who think like, how do I drive excellence? You can't change the culture. So, going to MLSE, it's a winning culture, right? The games, the teams, they are all about winning. The guest experience is second to none. I mean, they understand that those are life moments for so many people. Going to a game, family of four, it was amazing. And so there was an excellence already in the culture. I think my view is don't screw it up. That was certainly something that kept me up at night. But I think that it's understanding that you alone can't do that, right? So what's your sphere of influence? And so making sure that our attraction efforts, our learning and development was, helping people reach their full potential, right? And that's something that I learned at RBC as well, really believing in people's potential. And because, it was a reputable brand, we, brought people in, we had great, robust programs, practices, policies in place. I didn't have to do much. Now, within my own team and my own sphere of influence and what I do, I would say it's the thing I think about myself. So every day I go into work, and maybe this is putting too much pressure on myself, but I go in thinking, what value can I add today? Right? So how am I adding value? I never take the fact that I have a job for granted, ever. I never have. I think it was growing up in different recessions and probably imprints of my, parents over time, or it's the hyperachiever that it's, how am I creating value? What am I adding today? I'm so lucky to be here. How do I show up? What's my impact? And I think sometimes, inconsistency comes in, or people don't have that spark. And I like to visualize it. And I often told my grads in investor and treasury services at RBC in the program. So if anybody's listening, they'll know this. I would say, like think about a gas stovetop and that click, click, click noise just before the flame goes. And if you need a sound, think about that sound. If you need a visual, think about that flame. But think about the power that that flame, ignites. That's what you need to come into today with. And so, my team, when I'm leading a team or I'm working with others, they see me show up always. I'm a high performer and I, not demand, but I think that I inspire high performance around me.
Mhm.
And because of that, connector in me, I also have a lot of compassion and care for others. And so I mix this blend of I'm going to operate up here and I'm looking at value and how can we all create value and let's do it with a high level of care and attention to my team that like, I truly care about them. Like, I truly care about the people that I work with. I truly believe in their development. So I think if they are tapping into what value they can add and they're thinking about their impact on a day, and then they're seeing that, like, I see that too, and I believe that they can do even better and even, more, it kind of creates this excitement, but also the outcome of that is you see excellence in the programs, you see excellence in the experience. Um, One piece of advice, like coming into a culture like MLSE, one of the first things I did was shadow the ushers and security staff, security teams. And I didn't come, there was a couple people in HR that had come through. They'd come from an operations at MLSE into HR. I had come in from the bank and I knew it was such a different environment coming from a regulated global, bank, financial services to sports and entertainment, right? What a wild change that was. And I think that being able to see those ushers, see those security professionals come in and what they were faced with and what they did every night to provide such an amazing guest experience, it was like, how can I help them excel? Right. So I felt a different connection in my HR role because I really cared even about those people, keeping them safe on the job, keeping them interested and engaged, recognizing them for what they did on the spot, helping their managers have better conversations for them. So I really saw, if the outcome of this is guests have the best experience ever, listen, I am not an athlete. I am not going to be, on the ice telling Austin Matthews what to do, but I am working with those ushers and those security and food and beverage and their teams and managers to help them come in and enable and empower them to be their best.
I love that. I love that. It's so important because you always hear about stories of the ivory tower and the right, and
Oh no, yeah.
you gotta get out there and get your hands dirty.
Yeah, one of my, co-ops, was working. I actually didn't think I was gonna be in HR, I thought I was gonna be in supply chain, and so my co-ops at university at Laurier were all about, supply chain, and so, one summer, my stepdad, he worked at General Motors for, like, 20 plus years, and he was like, "You can't handle the line," and I was like, "Really? Get me a job." And so he was like, "Okay, yeah, sure." So I got on the night shift, one of the plants. I was the only female in that plant working that shift. And in my coveralls and my docks, I was the left rear vertical, final polish of paint. Like it was very physical. I got like total carpal tunnel syndrome from it. And I worked a summer there and part time at the Gap as well. But I worked a summer there just because out of spite, right? But then I got a co op at GM. And having that co-op experience in their procurement department, and I still know Allison Scanlon, who led me in that team, and I had such a unique perspective because I'd been in the plant.
Yeah.
And it was, it took away all the ego and it became, how do we create the best car? How do we get the best pricing? How do we do all of this? And how do I do it? Because those guys are working so hard. I got to get it right up here in procurement because, those teams at the plant, they're coming in 24 hours and it's just they're getting it their all and they deserve that. So I think that was, that kind of shook me and was definitely the thing that has inspired me. I'm always now thinking about that end experience and how do I get as close to that through the staff, through the employees, through the experiences that I can get while I'm working.
Absolutely. So let's talk about activating leadership. I know you describe yourself as a leadership skills activator. And what is the most
What does that mean?
Well, I get what it is. It's very, but what is the most common gap you see in modern leadership today?
It's still self-awareness. It's
Right.
still emotional intelligence. And again, I go back to self-awareness being part of emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Um, it's still that, right? And I think that's why when I look at the 3 dimensions, leading yourself, leading your team, and leading the business, I'm always starting with my clients now and consulting around leading self and understanding yourself. And this is again what's fascinating me about the work in the nervous system is I have to understand myself. What does stress look like on me? How does it impact my team? What happens when I'm over capacity? How do I recognize that? And so that kind of self-regulation, self-awareness, understanding, that's what gets in people's way. And it's even coming down to, a couple of my coaching clients, what are their values? Right.
Mhm.
And imagine they're 20 years into their career and they really haven't paused to think about that. And to me, it's such a critical part about why you show up, right? And when you're not aligned with your values, you can have a real physical reaction to that, trust me. So I think that, understanding themselves and knowing that as a person, as a human being, we're changing every day, right? We have what, 7,000 plus thoughts a day. Um, and so all of these things going through your mind, you are learning. So just because you were very self-aware in your 20s does not mean in your 40s that you're the same person. And so continue to reflect internally, continue to understand yourself, who you are, how you show up, what that looks like with different nervous system responses, how that changes your leadership style. And then, be very intentional about the routines and rhythms that you build for yourself based on your understanding of what your needs are, what your motivators are, what your values are, et cetera.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. Let's dig a little deeper here. I know you're a certified practitioner in DISC, personalized profile analysis, PPA, a popular psychometric testing tool. So for professionals, how can they understand their own, I guess call it wiring through these tools and help them make better career decisions?
So assessments, there's not like, yes, there's tons of research, but they're not like purely perfect. They're not,
Just right.
absolutely.
Right.
But it goes back to that self-awareness. They become a bit of a mirror. So I've never done a self-assessment and said, wow, this is completely wrong. Unless it's like, actually, I did one in university, and it was only because I was a paid guinea pig for the psychology department. And I don't think that student probably didn't get the Nobel Prize for their solution. But I remember going, that's not me at all. But most of them, right? Like if you think about Myers-Briggs, you think about DISC, StrengthsFinder, all of that. I've done them all. And I go, okay, yes, it's just more information. And I think through that, it's more about learning. I would never use an assessment as a perfect formula to tell if somebody's going to be good or bad at a job. I would use that bit of information and then ask questions. So when we started to use, when we were using PPA, these assessments at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, or even when I used assessments in my grad programs at RBC, it was not to say are they good or bad, are they right or wrong. It was that's interesting. What are the questions, and how can I personalize these questions to actually get to a better understanding of that individual. So if the PPA is telling me, well, this person doesn't work well with others, my questions, I might lean into things around, a classic tell me about a time when you had conflict in a team, but like, something along those lines to test. So it's trust but verify, and use assessments as one of those opportunities to get some information, trust but verify it through your own line of questioning. And same with me. I still do assessments all the time. I just did one because I'm in the positive intelligence program right now, and you can do it for free. It's a saboteur assessment. And I got it and I said, okay, that's interesting. What am I going to do with this information? Is there a way that I can pick one thing from this assessment, one thing, because habits are so hard to change, and kind of work on it a bit? If it's something that's really bugging me or something that might get in the way as a barrier in the future, what can I do today as a new habit or an integrated routine into my day that can challenge that a bit. And that's changed. Like so many times it's like New Year's resolutions, which I don't do. But it's like, oh, this is going to be the year I lose 20 pounds. And then everybody, after they've got their Good Life membership, kind of, quits by January 27th or something like that. Probably today. They started to quit today. And my thought process is, okay, what are the things that we actually need to do? And it's all about those, atomic habits and building them into the routines that we already have.
Right, right. And actually thinking back, reflecting on what you said earlier about data, it's like this is a data point that you need to do something with, right?
Explore it. Right. And if you have these assessments at work, like there's so many cool ones. What I like about DISC is it's so simple and it's color coded.
I like DISC too.
Yeah. And so I have all the tools now and I'm doing it with clients. And it's so interesting how it's evolved because now you can actually use the AI in DISC to say, okay, well, I've got this. How do I actually work with this individual and have a, conversation with them, which I think might be a bit difficult? What are some of the things that I do naturally? What are some of the things that DISC is saying they do naturally? And it just gives you a different perspective going into a conversation. So it can be really, in the moment, kind of like a supportive coach to kind of get you through something. So just more information. It's what you do with it that matters, turning insights into action.
Yeah, I think about a time I worked at an organization where we did it as a team, and
Yeah,
all were
I love that.
so I would say 90% of the team were eyes in the eye area.
That's because we're in HR. They're all
But
eyes.
we're all like, no wonder we can't make a decision. Everyone's but the insights gave us the thought to like, hey, someone's got to
We gotta balance
phase this out. We need to balance and put out a decision. Right?
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because to your point, again, the data point as a team drove us to say, okay, when we get stuck, someone has to
Yeah.
stop doing the blue sky stuff and
Yeah.
be focused. But
Was that our team? Because I could see that we've.
no, it was another. I don't know if we did it as a team there too. I think we did, but this is when I remember where the actions, it told us we had to make some actions and changes because
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like that's also like balancing out from a recruitment perspective. Like that's what, we needed to use that information more effectively, I think, than we were at MLSE in retrospect, because there is a balance to this. And we were lucky our HR team there did have, fair amount of eyes, but some balance out there. But then we realized the work was understanding each other, realizing,
that's the key part.
yeah. Somebody said like, eyes is just fluff, right? Okay. My view is I'm not going to get defensive. Let me understand that statement a little more. Tell me what you mean by that. Like, let's work through that, because if that's your perception, I've got my work cut out for me. I've got to do something here. Yeah, maybe. And again, maybe work on being more concise.
Exactly. No, we all have learning. We all have it's new growth, right? Thinking about people and culture, what's one of the most sort of things you've learned from, I guess, working in many geographies and across global roles and things, but what have you thought that is the most surprising thing you've learned about people and culture that isn't really taught in textbooks?
Well, I didn't go to school for HR, so I can't say that anything was taught to me in that textbook. I was in economics, and so I think it was more looking at the connections of people. I think that people are all so unique, right? So this is my fascination right now is I am a total nerd when it comes to everything that I consume, reading wise audiobooks, is leadership development, is understanding different people's perspectives on people. Right. And I love it because it's learning. And then on the flip side, I love self-help books. And so even there was a book I read a while ago and it really changed my thinking. What happened to you? So oftentimes we say, what's wrong with you? And this book, What Happened to You, it challenged the way that I think. And so much, is formed in those early years. And if we experience trauma, and taking that trauma-informed view of leadership is so critical. So I don't think anything could be pure textbook. I think life is a textbook. I think that again, if we're not learning, we're not living. It is the breath I take every day. I think that you really just, you get the foundations. And I think what school teaches us, hopefully, is critical thinking. It really nurtures that, the why behind the what, asking questions, um, seeing things as bigger than our narrow perspective. It challenges our views and things like that. But I think, especially now, when the textbook for students can be online and, so hard to trust information out there.
That's
I
right.
think that we have to basically get as much information as we can and understand that we're always learning. And with people, um, everyone's different. And so the first thing is don't assume. Assumptions are going to get in your way. Ask the right questions and keep digging. And when you've got something that's kind of on your mind, do more research, right? Get more into it, roll up your sleeves, and ask the right questions. Go into your network, ask them questions from their experience. But I think there's so little in a textbook. There's so much that we get just by our own curiosity and what drives us every day.
And our lived experiences.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
so wow, this has been so much fun and so inspiring to lots of takeaways here for the listeners. If you could leave the audience with one piece of advice or one perspective on something on how they might think about strengthening their own personal self, what would it be?
Strengthening themselves. I think try to find more time for yourself and real time for yourself, not the scroll factor. I love that you do this podcast because, you can walk the dog and listen to it. You can, kind of be on a commute and listen to it. And I think that is a different sensory than this scroll culture that we're constantly on. I think that we think that downtime is just kind of watching TV or going on Instagram or things like that. But I think that leaning into learning and silence and, kind of coming into ourselves, I think is really important. We are at a time when there's so much divisiveness. And I think when we understand ourselves, it helps us reflect a little more on trying to understand others and coming together with people. So, one piece of advice is, just don't forget yourself, right? Give that time to yourself because the world is stretching our capacity and wanting so much of us. And, sit with your cup of coffee, take the time, take a deep breath and know that that investment in self is one of the best investments that you can make. We don't often put a value on ourselves and we really need to start doing that.
Thank you. That's amazing. And one other quick thing, how can people find you and your business? I want to make sure we
Oh, okay. I forgot we were on a podcast. I was like, "Oh, so anyways, Brian, when are we having coffee next? This has been delightful." Um, so I have my website, tcstalentconsulting.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tiffany Smye, Smye. I did change my name at the start of the podcast. I realized it was just saying Tiffany. People call me Tiff sometimes. And you can certainly contact me through either. I think if you're, at a point where you need some, challenge, some conversation. I think coaching, we oftentimes think if we just have time, I'll figure out what to do with my next job if I just have some time. Time isn't the only thing. A partner to help you through that is often the most important. So on my website, there's a opportunity under services to find me as a coach, and certainly look at my client options as well for facilitated learning. I've got some leadership programs on there and HR advisory. So, yeah, on my website, TCS Talent Consulting, or on LinkedIn, SMYE. That would be the best way to find me.
amazing. Well, first of all, thank you for being on here today and having this conversation with me. It's been a pleasure. And
You do so much. Thank you, Brian. Like you have your hand in so many different things and you do this out of actual care for others and wanting to see others do well. And I think that we can all learn from that. And the fact that you do this on top of everything else, I don't know how you do and how you do it so consistently, but thank you for the conversation. We'll definitely after this figure out when we can meet up for a meal or a coffee or something like that. And I hope that those listening today have some takeaways that they can put into action, and then come back to when they get to meet your next speaker.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tiffany. To our listeners, if today is an episode that helped you see the bigger picture of your career, share it with your friends, subscribe to the podcast at coffeewithconvery.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, behind the scenes clips and other exciting information shared there. This is Coffee with Convery, where we remind you that success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.